Welcome to Between Sundays. I'm Tyler, and I feel a menace at an incomprehensible exousia and a great disturbance in the force. Today, our feeble skills are no match for the dark side. And we'll feel the power of the story of the Roman Centurion. But before the Empire strikes back, now that I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel, let's welcome in our favorite rebels, Marin and Barry. Good day, guys.
Good day.
Good day indeed.
And may the force be with you.
Man, I could have kept
well.
going with that one.
Yeah.
I wrote a bunch of different versions of this, and man, there's just
Gave you some good fodder.
references,
Yeah.
unlimited.
So many.
Yeah.
Marin,
Nope. Nope.
did a sermon comparing the Roman Empire to the Galactic Empire, like, did that?
That spoke to your soul, right?
Yeah, or did that just like
Okay.
glaze your eyes over a little bit?
While I have seen Star Wars because
Yeah.
of the family that I live with, I was listening the whole time thinking, man, only Barry can speak to these people. I have nothing to say to these people. Barry, you know their language.
What? Nerds?
The language of Star Wars.
Oh,
the
sure.
language of pop culture in general.
Well,
I don't
for
speak
those
their language.
for those that are actual like major Star Wars nerds, you'll notice that almost all of my references, I kept it to the original trilogy
Yeah.
so that I wouldn't exclude anybody that was maybe a bit older and has not kept up with the prequels or the sequels. So I didn't talk about the First Order. I wasn't talking about, I did mention trade, but I didn't get into trade negotiations.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Marin.
I'm just going to take a little snooze.
No.
I kept it very original trilogy.
Well, it
centric.
worked. It
Thank
totally
you.
worked. My husband and I, we went for a walk. I asked him, I wasn't actually in service yesterday. I asked
yeah.
him.
Yeah, I was going to
what-
mention that.
She heard
what
I was
the
talking about
message
Star
was
Wars.
about. I said, what was the message about? And normally he's got to like roll through the tapes in his mind. Like, okay, what did he say? Yeah, he said this, that, and the other. But it was right there. He's like, oh, it was awesome.
Wow.
Oh, great.
It was great. It's a
Wonderful.
great message. He really drove it home. Like, you
Great.
got him. You
Good
got
for
him.
That's
Jed.
awesome.
You speak the language of the people.
Every now and then you got to give the people what you like. I had a blast writing that sermon for
Yeah.
multiple reasons. A, I got to write about the Roman Empire. You know I love that.
Oh,
The Roman
man.
Empire is my Roman
Like
Empire.
moth to a flame.
And I got to write about Star Wars as a part of it because I realized that would be a fun way to kind of draw it all together. And that was just so much fun. I wrote it in like 15 minutes. I was like,
And the
I'm
AI
joking.
generated images.
Yes.
So much fun.
Thank you.
That's so fun.
Yeah, it was very fun to see what. Actually, I was doing that, and it created all those images for me. It was great, and then I wanted to modify the Cantina scene image, and I was like, "Can you put that with a human sitting at the table as well?" And it started working on it, and then it just stopped and said, "I'm sorry, this image cannot be created due to our content policies."
Whoa.
And I was like, "Oh, I was
Since
like,
when?
I said, well, it doesn't have to be a movie star. It can be anybody." And it said, "Sorry, can't do it."
Wow.
And I was like, "Well, can you do this?" It's like, "I'm sorry, I can't do it." Disney got to ChatGPT while I was working with it.
You
so
found the limits.
I did. I reached the end.
Wow.
So anyway, what a fun time.
Yeah.
How are you guys doing?
Good. Yeah. How are you guys? What's going on?
I'm a
What's
little
new?
tired. Were you guys doing much with Grace Kids?
I was going to ask you how you're doing.
Yeah.
Because you told everybody you were leading is
a
it third grade?
Yeah. Yeah. Guys, it's amazing. It's so I am a little tired, but like my group is amazing this year. Last year I had fifth graders, okay? And these were fifth grade boys, and half of them were fine. Half of them were way too cool to be in a kids camp group.
Yeah.
Like they're literally, we're trying to do our Bible study and they're like over there shrugging in the corner, smoking a cigarette. Like they're just like, like this
Fifth
isn't
grade's
my
hard.
Fifth grade is rough, but third grade, going into third grade, sweet spot. And the kids that I got, they're wonderful. They're just like well behaved. They're quiet. At one point, we were kind of in like a medium-sized group doing like a Bible review thing, and I heard some kids kind of whispering behind me, and I turned around to my group. I was like, "Hey guys, let's keep." And I realized they were all just sitting there quietly looking up at the teacher. It was the group behind them that was making the noise, and I'm like, "You guys." Just
Angels.
I got a group of angels.
Aren't they all related? I heard they're all related.
Well, no. Yeah. I mean, Grayson Mitchell is in my group, and he has 3 of his cousins from 2 different sides of his family there. So, that part of the group is related. But no, the rest, they're wonderful. And I was like, some of the stuff that normally happens over the course of the week was happening like right away. Like kids getting to know each other, feeling at home. There was one girl who came in and she was like a little mouse talking so quietly no one could even hear her say her name. By the end, she was just as like into it and talking
Good.
full volume
That's
like
the
everybody
dream.
else. But usually that takes like days.
Yeah.
She was already end of day one. Best part, the thing that made me so happy is when the parents finally came to start picking up the kids, almost all of them said, "Aw," when their mom got there.
Great.
That's a win as far as I'm
We'll see
concerned.
how they go on Thursday.
Yeah, they'll be weeping as they
Yeah.
leave to be with
That's
this
cool.
guy.
I think the theme's cool.
Yeah.
The
twists and turns.
You would think the theme is cool.
games like the
board
House of
games.
Cards on the stage. That was
Yes.
incredible. I don't know who made that. Probably
Jim and Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jim Swanson built it. Jim
Unbelievable.
Fansler did the designs. They're amazing.
Yeah. I don't have like an official role in kids camp.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not really, I mean, I'm here in the mornings for like check-in and stuff like that. But
Your kids are here, right?
yeah, my kids and wife are all here. She's doing Lyft and the kids are just doing their own thing. But I don't, once check-in's over, it's like
Guess I better go work.
normal work day.
Yeah.
Marin, are you doing anything for this year?
I do not. I do not have a specific role this
Oh,
year.
they phased us out.
I don't know. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but no, I don't have a specific role. I've done out loud in the past with
Yeah,
my kids.
right.
Like there have been years past where I was like all in and it was my whole week. But it's weird. It's weird
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
here and not have like a specific role tied to kids
Yeah.
camp.
So what are you doing this week?
School.
Last week?
School.
Yeah.
Is it your final week of the semester?
This week is nuts. I just don't have somebody messaged me yesterday and I told them when it rains it pours and it's monsoon season. This is the week of monsoon season. I didn't realize that it would kind of culminate in my final paper being due on Friday, but my sermon notes for Sunday being due on Wednesday. So it's both of these things at the same time.
Have you started on your sermon notes?
So I started studying for the sermon weeks ago.
Yeah.
I haven't started writing the sermon yet, which hopefully will start tomorrow, but I got to get this paper done. I want to get one draft of the paper done before Friday.
Could the sermon and your paper be the same thing?
No, sadly.
That would have been nice.
No. What do you want to know about Black liberation theology? Actually,
He partied hard.
is it Deotis Roberts? I
don't
had
know.
a
Are you
book.
asking?
I had his Reconciliation and Liberation book, and a picture of us fell out of it.
Me and you?
Like all three of us. It's that like
The
one of these
podcast picture.
pictures.
That- yeah.
Oh.
From the days of old. I must
Like
have
a
just
bookmark?
stuffed it in there like a bookmark.
That's funny.
So you were with me in
Yeah,
my
all right.
That
study.
moment.
I felt it. Yeah. Well, you better not miss we're supposed to go to a concert. You better not miss
The
that.
concert is strategic. That's going to be like the way that I celebrate that everything got done. That's,
so it's after.
yeah.
Okay.
That's the thing I'm like looking forward to,
All right,
but I have
good.
to push through monsoon season to
Yeah.
get there.
It's like the
so.
one concert I'm going to this year, except for the one last week.
Yeah, we went and saw John Guerra
Yeah.
last week. That
I
was
thought you were
awesome.
coming.
I just never got around to buying tickets.
Yeah. It was
it
amazing.
great?
John Guerra, everybody, friends of the pod. John Guerra, Guerra. Right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
If you want music that's like Christian, but a little what would you call it? It's definitely
It's
not
so
like
deep.
K-Love Christian.
It's
It's
just
super deep and it's
profound. It's
yeah, man.
beautiful.
It sometimes is worship sounding, sometimes it's just like liturgical in nature.
He
He
really
had a lot of songs.
wrestles with a lot of things that a lot of Christians wrestle with today. Which I love his lyrics. I should have gone, honestly. I'm a fan.
Yeah,
and I
it was
think we
really,
were at
really
Moody
good.
Bible Institute at the same time.
Yeah.
We may actually know each other distantly,
Huh.
but anyway.
Yeah.
He's-
There were a lot of songs he did that were basically from Matthew, either based on the Beatitudes. And it was moment after moment of like, oh man, we totally could have done this song 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, when he came out, he kind of looked like, I was like, oh, who's the professor on stage? Because like he was wearing just
Tweed.
he was wearing like jeans and a like quarter zip.
I love the things you notice. If you asked me right now what he was wearing on stage, I could not tell you. Just
Well, it was
Didn't
cool
even
because
register.
it's like he doesn't care about that. It's all about the music.
Yeah.
You know? So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
it was really good. John Guerra. Also at John Guerra, Marin informed me
oh,
that
stop! No.
she well, first of all, here's how this conversation went. The past 2 weeks on this podcast, Marin's been like, huh, basketball?
Is that what I sound like?
To him, you do.
Tell me again what I sound
basketball,
like.
Indiana, playoffs.
That's the orange one.
So
I'm making fun as if I'm not exactly
yeah.
the same.
we
Go
went to
ahead.
John
Team up on
Guerra.
me.
We went to John Guerra, my wife and I, with Marin and Jed and Jaden and his girlfriend Maddie. And Marin, we're like, hey, what's going on? What'd you guys do this weekend? And Marin's like, I watched the end of the first game of the NBA Finals, and we came back and won.
I did not say.
You said we?
I used the word
Yeah.
we accidentally one time.
I-
It probably
You
wasn't
said-
in that context.
You said I was watching, and I
Nope,
couldn't
nope.
believe we came back.
Nope.
And I was like, we? Like in the middle of the sanctuary of this concert, I was like, excuse me.
You have shamed me so deeply that I left
I'm not shaming.
the game running in the background as background noise, but I had noise canceling headphones in my ears as I
Yeah.
read the works of Howard Thurman. Okay,
Jesus and the Disinherited.
I'm just so happy.
that's
I
the
said-
one.
I love that book.
I just
Yes.
said I was in complete disbelief because Marin got excited. Her and Desi were jumping around the house from your story, and
Desi was in the kitchen. I couldn't see the TV.
still room on the
At
bandwagon.
one point, I pulled my noise canceling earbud out and said, Des, what's the score? It just so happened it was like a minute and a half before
Yeah.
the game ended.
Yeah.
She's like, we're down. We are down.
Yeah, so
But then we won.
my husband wasn't even in the room.
Yeah.
My daughter and I, we were like chewing our nails down to nubs. Like, why did we care? Why did we care?
Those Pacers, they just draw you in. There's still room on the
sports for you.
bandwagon. There's a couple games left. They got smoked last night, but
I asked
coming
your
back
wife.
to Indy.
I wanted to come to this podcast informed.
we're coming
So
back
I
to
said,
Indy,
Did
and
you
hopefully we
win?
can get two
Did
two
you
wins in.
win last
No,
night?
did we? We did not win. We got smoked. All right, I think that's it. A little housekeeping. I should have done this at the beginning. Housekeeping. We're back. We're active again. Between Sundays podcast. The Between Sundays podcast on Instagram. We're active. So
we're active.
follow us if you haven't already. We've got some clips that show up. So
I don't know if I follow us.
Between Sundays podcast on Instagram, and follow Grace Church IN on YouTube. The pod's on YouTube, everybody. So if you wonder, if you're like, I can't remember what Marin and Barry's fruit lists from last week looked like.
Oh, I haven't seen. Did we actually get them on the screen?
Yeah,
I need
they're
to
on the
look it up.
screen. So if you're wondering like what we look like just talking to each other, go to YouTube.
Yeah.
Wondering
Yeah.
what Tyler wore on this very warm day.
Yeah.
It's a black hoodie.
No, but there's a lot of work that's been put in, and so we want you to like and subscribe on YouTube as well. So Grace
Smash
Church,
that
Grace Church
subscribe
UN.
button. Smash that subscribe button.
Grace Church IN, not UN.
Ring that bell.
I watch a lot of cooking shows.
Hmm.
Saw someone the other day say, so go get your meat tenderizer and just tenderize that little subscribe button a little bit. Just
No,
a
no,
little
no, no,
bit."
no.
I hate that. That is. Oof.
Jed hated it too.
All right, week 8, nailed
Yeah.
it. Nailed
got
it.
it. You got it.
Week 8 of our current sermon series about Matthew called Follow Me, and you focused. It was easy for me to remember because you focused on Matthew 8.
Yeah.
Great. Week 8,
Easy.
Matthew 8.
Yep.
So what's the big idea other than Star Wars that you wanted us to walk away with?
Yeah. So the story that we looked at today in Matthew chapter 8 is about a Roman centurion or Roman officer coming to Jesus and pleading with him to heal his servant. And ultimately, Jesus does heal his servant from a distance. And kind of my angle or my approach to the message is that normally when we read that story, it's like, neat. But when we understand the context, the deeper realities of what this would have meant for a Roman centurion of all people to be coming to Jesus, it really just changes this moment from neat to astonishing. And so we looked at kind of two layers of it. One being the fact that he was an officer of the Roman military, then the second being that he was a Gentile. And basically, the story itself is one of the ways that Matthew is helping his readers understand the mission of God, the kingdom of God, and what inclusion of the other looks like in the church, especially Gentiles. So, and I kind of had a couple of takeaways that I think could influence our own faith, but the basic big idea is that God's kingdom is for everyone.
Yeah.
There's room at the table for everyone.
Okay. Yeah. So you asked us a couple of times to feel like the weight of the story.
Yeah.
And so in the moment when I was sitting in service, I could feel or picture what it'd be like for like first century readers of Matthew's original audience that would see this or read this. I could put myself in their position as like Jewish people reading this. Some of them, especially like Gentiles, it's like probably super freeing. For others, I'm sure they were like stick up their noses at it or whatever. But as I've rewatched the sermon, as I've thought about this, I was wondering, like, from the Roman side, what did they think about things like this? Like, did they care that something like this would have happened, or did it not even like get on their radar? Like, one of our own is bowing down, basically, or acknowledging the authority of this guy. Like, did Rome have any feelings about that? Like, would the guy's superior or the people that he commanded, like, what would they have thought about this?
We don't know. Short answer is we don't know. But I would imagine that, fraternizing with the Judeans would have been something that would have been looked down upon by his superiors or even by his own soldiers. Like, what are you doing? You're hanging out with those guys? Why are you going and talking to that rabbi? Like, we're here to keep these rabble in order, and you're doing what? Like that I'm sure would have been, relatively unsettling for some.
Especially not a Pharisee, not like, somebody with any kind of notoriety, but just this rabbi that's kind of wandering with a ragtag bunch of followers.
Right. Yeah. Now, with that said, I'll add some other nuances to it, which is he's a centurion from Capernaum, which was Jesus's home base. And Luke, in his version of this story, he adds a bit more background to this centurion being someone who was kind of a friend to the Jews in Capernaum. So he was like a good God-fearing man, like he was looked up to. He worked, in fact, in that story, he doesn't come to Jesus himself. He sends two Jewish leaders, synagogue leaders, to Jesus on his behalf. So it's kind of, he's basically, he's respected by the locals. So that's one thing which would say, like, he wasn't necessarily starting out as this like hostile foreigner. He already had some level of a good relationship with the Jewish community. And I didn't get into this in the message. I just mentioned that he was a foreigner. Likely all the Roman troops that would have been stationed in Judea were from other nations. They probably were not like Latin-speaking Italians. That was not the case. Usually the way the Roman military worked is after they conquered an area, they would then enlist a bunch of soldiers from that area to police the areas next door. And so he could have been a Samaritan. He could have been from Syria. He could have been from Anatolia. So he was definitely foreign he was a Gentile, but he wasn't necessarily just like, don't think like Italian. When you think about this guy, that a couple things. So all that to say, it's a little difficult to know all the nuances of what would have been going on. But when you zoom out and you think about what did Rome mean to the Judeans, you can understand pretty clearly the animosity that would have been there.
I also think about like the turmoil. Like I would have loved to seen like what his thought process was before, because all it says is when Jesus came to Capernaum or entered Capernaum, this guy came up to him. Yeah. Like, did the guy know Jesus was coming? Was he like wrestling with whether or not he should do this thing, or was he like, this is a no-brainer, this guy's coming, and or was he like, I know what this will mean and it's worth the cost?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are
I don't
you writing
know.
these down? Because it sounds like, when you see him, when you meet him on the other side,
that'll be,
you're going to have a long conversation. You're going to interview him on your heavenly podcast.
It speaks very highly of your thoughts on Between Sundays, that it's still going to be going in the afterlife.
Yeah, and that the first guy I'm going to bring on is the Roman Centurion.
And that's what you're going to ask him.
I'd bring him on. I'd be so curious.
So I just wonder about his process.
I wonder too.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably, Matthew's a little unclear on exactly how long things had been going on at this point, but Jesus had been healing and teaching around the area. His name would have likely been a name people would have heard of. And as a healer, like if someone asked me, why did he care so much about his servant? And I was like, another great question. I don't know. We're not told.
Yeah.
But he clearly cares deeply about this servant who's in great pain. So how many healing stories had he heard rumors of by
Mm.
Jesus. But when his beloved servant is falling ill, he's like, I have to go to him. That's the only
Yeah,
option.
and like how many other things had he tried? Or
yeah.
was this the first thing?
Yeah.
You know, whatever.
Dunno.
Much of my life, I have found myself to be someone who challenges authority, wondering why some authority institution or authoritative institution or figure like thinks they know me better than I know myself, kind of thing. But as I was looking at the story through the lens of your sermon, I was like, what does this story have to say about how I or we should view authority? Because I've always seen authority as kind of like, I've always felt like it could be super oppressive, but this is like a sacred authority. What is it?
Exousia.
That like it kind of requires us to view authority differently if we find ourselves someone who's like distrusting of authority.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you right, like as someone who is kind of naturally, your natural predilection is to resist authority structures in the world.
Yeah.
That could create some friction when you think of the idea of Jesus having authority.
Or question them.
Or question.
Maybe
question them.
Maybe not outright resist them,
Yeah.
but question them for sure.
Yeah, because it's like most authority, especially if we're going to the Star Wars comparison, like if you submit to the authority of the Empire, you lose your identity. Especially if you're like, I'm going to fight for the Empire. Right? They were literally using clones for a while.
Yeah.
Marin, stay with us.
I'm trying.
They were literally using clones for a while.
Clones of who?
Clones of who?
Yeah. Who did they clone? Boba Fett's dad. We all know.
Why did you point at me for that? Oh my goodness.
Isn't that right? Or is it? It's not
yeah.
Boba Fett himself, right? It's his dad.
It's not Boba Fett.
No, it's his dad.
Django.
Yeah,
Jango
Jango Fett.
If this ever happens again, will you have my son sit in my place?
If this
Don't
ever
put me
happens
through
again.
this.
So they literally use clones. So they're like losing their identity.
Yeah.
And your identity becomes the Empire. It becomes the authority that they've submitted themselves to. So submitting to authority, especially if it's like oppressive authority, could feel like you're like erasing part of your identity.
Yeah.
But submitting to Jesus's authority, like this guy, it's like, it's not erasure. It's like bigger than that. It's like submitting to authority, and his identity is making you like it's bringing you to be the person that he wants you to be.
Yeah.
But it's like full life. It's like I don't know. It just made me wonder, like, why is it so hard to submit to authority, but also Jesus's authority, because it will make us. Submitting to his authority will make us who we want to be. But I've always been somebody who's just kind of like, nah, I'll do my own thing.
Right. Yeah, I think what's so different about Jesus's authority is with submission to his authority comes freedom, not further oppression. You're right. Like if you submit to the dark side and the dark powers of the Empire, like you end up becoming another clone, another nobody in the midst of just a, little cog in the machine. But with Jesus's authority, his yoke is easy, his burden is light. It's like we find who we really are. We find our identity because his authority comes from a place of self-giving love, not from a place of oppressive power. So it is an inversion, but I understand what you're saying. It's that same kind of feeling of like, you can't tell me what to do. That's how we're all wired as Americans, maybe.
And isn't that exactly the story of Han Solo? He's not just a smuggler. He's a general in the Rebel Alliance.
Did you ask ChatGPT just now to give you some?
do know a few things.
You do know a few things. Yeah.
He couldn't become who he truly was until he was aligned with
an authority structure.
The right side. The good side.
Yeah.
When Jesus heard from this officer in verse 10, it says that Jesus was amazed and declared that he hasn't seen faith like this in all Israel.
Yeah.
First of all, if I was one of the disciples, I'd be like,
hey.
Yeah, like you could have put it differently than that, man. Like we've been following you around for this whole time, and this guy has the most amazing faith. Yeah. Anyways, but second about that was what was different about this guy's faith than what Jesus had seen. Like, if this is the most amazing faith that he's seen in all Israel, like, what was so different about it that kind of stopped him in his tracks?
Yeah.
I would think it's because the Roman Centurion wasn't one of them. You know, he was a rabbi and he had followers who were Jewish, who were seeking out, you know, to learn from and walk in the path of their rabbi. It's a far different thing, as Barry's been talking about, to have somebody on the outside of that group express the authority of Jesus. I think, I wonder if Jesus was, I mean, obviously he knows everything he's got, but in his humanness, was he just as surprised to have a Roman centurion come to him with such faith? I mean, that's why he said what he said. Faith like this I have not seen.
I mean, it says he was amazed.
Yeah.
One of the themes that is in Matthew, I'm trying to figure out exactly when and where to focus on it, is it's kind of the inverse of what we're seeing with this Roman centurion, which is the overall rejection by the people of Israel. This is the group of people that are God's chosen people, and their leaders, many of the people themselves, reject Jesus' authority. They reject, and they don't believe in his abilities, his powers, his teaching, his truth. And that's a theme that we see all throughout. And so when you see these characters that do have amazing faith, it's a refreshing moment where, like in Matthew's gospel, you see like the disciples, it's about halfway through that Peter officially finally declares, you are the Son of God. You know, it takes, they have to cook for a while before Peter even gets to that point. And then the very next, passage is Jesus saying to him, "Get behind me, Satan," because he's telling him, "You don't have to die." So it's like, they are slow. They're not getting it. And this, honestly, it's a whole other conversation, but there's a really interesting thread of following, even from like the prophecies of Isaiah, that basically set it up, the idea that the people of Israel will not believe. They will be hard of hearts. Like that's what's going to happen. And so it's almost like, and then yet we see the ultimate result of that is because of their hard hearts, the Gentiles are welcomed in, which in a roundabout way leads to ultimately all people having access to the salvation of God. So anyway, it's a whole other thread.
Yeah.
Don't have to get into,
I guess,
but.
And you talked about it a little bit in the sermon, which is like, this guy, he's in the military. He probably has a greatly different understanding of what authority means than Jesus's disciples. Like, everything is either above or below him, in terms of rank and order and all that stuff. And meanwhile, his disciples were still like trying to figure out what the Messiah meant, you know, like, so made me wonder, really, if kind of what you were saying, Maren, like maybe sometimes outsiders see more clearly than we do.
Yeah.
They have less trappings.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you're right. I think the disciples having, some knowledge of Hebrew scripture, or at least passed down to them through tradition, they're having to wade through all that stuff, prophecy and things like that, trying to figure out who he is. And the Roman centurion is free from all of that. And he just sees a man with authority.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, even just think about the disciples right before all of the miracles of Jesus. I'm thinking of like the miraculous feeding of the 5,000. Their first reaction is, Jesus is like, "Hey, feed them." And they're like, "There's no way we can feed them."
Right. Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, do you have any bread? Do you have any fish? Watch." And then they feed all these people. If the centurion was there, presumably, perhaps he would have said, "Go feed them." And he would have said, "Great. Should I start with the loaves? Because I know if you say it, it's going to be done." Like that. That's the kind of faith that is astonishing to Jesus that a Gentile would have when his own disciples are like. And the crazy thing is, in Matthew, there's two feedings. There's a feeding of the 4,000 that happens later, and they still don't get it. They still are like, "Yeah, but there's no food here, Jesus." It's like, come on, guys. So I think that's what's so astonishing is he doesn't even question it. He just knows that Jesus can heal from a distance with a word. Like that's wild.
Yeah, it makes me wonder what our day-to-day life should look like because I guess, I mean, we sing the songs every week. We acknowledge Jesus' authority every week in church. we sang a song called, I don't know what it's called, but it's basically like He Won't Fail this past weekend. And we sing about it. We talk about it. We listen, and we live in a way that tries to acknowledge and live by this authority. But like, I would question, if Jesus like, go feed these people, I'd be like, this isn't going to work.
Right.
So I still do that.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, well, like what my life should look like. That's different now than prior to me acknowledging his authority. But in some ways, it kind of looks the same because I still would question those types of things.
Yeah, and I mean that was my first reflection question was all about like how much faith do I have in the authority of Christ to actually change my world? And I acknowledged, I mean, when things get grim, like I struggle to have faith. I kind of pray but assume that God will do less than I ask. You know, versus praying and assuming he's going to do more than I ask, which is kind of that Ephesians passage I mentioned. Ephesians? Whatever, the passage I mentioned from Paul. Measurably more than all we can ask or imagine. What is the reference? Anybody know?
Beyond all we can ask or think.
Yeah.
And I have to look it up.
I think it's Ephesians. Anyway, apologize, people. I don't actually know
Yeah, Ephesians.
everything. Thank you.
3:20.
Yeah, I knew it, obviously. I just didn't doubt for a second.
Back to Star Wars.
Okay, let's go back.
So, who in real life would this guy be? Because in Star Wars, like, Stormtrooper comes over to the light side or whatever. You're like, no thanks. Because, like,
Not a big deal.
they're famously bad at their job.
Yeah.
They, like, can't hit anything.
Well, yeah.
So, like,
in the movies, they're bad at shooting. In the lore, they are like the Roman legions. They're these unstoppable legions of just countless troops that can just. There's always more to fill in. So they are.
There's a lot of them, but they're in the movies at least.
In the movies, they're not super effective.
if they were to like come over to the light side or whatever, it like wouldn't be that big of a deal to me.
Yeah.
So like this seems like it was a huge deal. So. What's like a real life example of this?
Real life or
Yeah.
Star Wars?
Well,
Because I don't think he would be to use the metaphor a little too much. I don't think he's necessarily a stormtrooper. I think he's an officer, which is to some degree a little different level. Like it could be if you want to use the sequels, like a Captain Phasma. What's her name? The tall actress. Anyway, with the silver outfit. Like if she went over to the light side, you'd be like, whoa, like that's kind of a big deal. That would have been a big twist in the movies. Or like
Gwendolyn Christie.
Thank you. But I mentioned in my sermon, it's like, imagine this guy being one of those like stuffy British sounding guys in the space Nazi outfits. Like that's who I'm imagining. One of those
You did
guys.
say space Nazi
I did.
in a sermon.
Because they wear like they're dressed. The officers in Star Wars are literally dressed like Nazi elites. Like it's not even
I thought that was going to make its way into your intro.
space Nazi.
Space Nazi.
We leave that to sermons. we don't touch that. So would this be like in a real example? Would this be like an American general being like, or
Yeah, I don't know. The modern military doesn't work because I was like trying to think, okay, who would command 100 people, and it's a captain, and I don't know that a captain would necessarily like wow you.
I think of it as someone with influence, and I feel like we do have this every so often. The first example that comes to mind is like when somebody in the art world, either a movie star or a rock star or something like that, like has a conversion experience.
like Kanye West?
Like what's
Justin
his name?
Bieber.
No, I just had his name. Brian Head Welsh from Korn. When a rock star like totally radically changes their life.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
You know, and people are like, whoa, it's astonishing to this day when somebody who holds a large level of an influence over other people who's living in one direction or living for the wrong empire suddenly does an about face and has a conversion experience. Like people take notice. People are in awe of that.
Yeah, because it made me wonder, like, who is this person? So if it's the guy from that, I don't think it's him, but I get what you're saying. It has this radical thing, but I'm like, before the transformation, like, they're a part of the problem. Like, the Roman Centurion, before this moment, like, Jewish people were like, no,
Right.
you're part of the problem.
Right.
So who what would I do, or what would we do if a guy like, if Jesus praises a faith of the guy who has this radical transformation of this rock star? Like, how would we feel about that?
I think a lot of us would cheer, but like in the example I just gave, there were a lot of Christians that were like,
Yeah, that's right.
not in my church.
Yeah.
Those tattoos don't belong in my church.
Yeah. You spell corn with a C.
Corn.
In my church.
Not even a K, it's a backwards K.
Here's like a little historical background, which doesn't really tell us anything for sure. But so if you imagine the Sea of Galilee, on the western side of the Sea of Galilee is the city of Tiberias, named after the Emperor Tiberius. And that was where Herod Antipas had his headquarters. So like the whole region that he oversaw as this client ruler of Rome, tetrarch. Anyway, he was the one who oversaw like the Roman like the Roman auxiliaries that he would have had control over. Capernaum is about a 4-hour walk from Tiberias, so it's not super far away. Presumably, based on some guesses on how many soldiers there might have actually been, it's possible that this centurion was the head of all the Roman soldiers in Capernaum. So it's like smaller town than Tiberias, or at least less important. That would have been the HQ where the generals would be. He maybe was in charge of all the soldiers who were stationed in Capernaum. So it's not nothing. That's still like the guy who's in charge of all the Romans that I'm interacting with on a day-to-day basis. So I don't know, just a little bit of background. But it's possible there were more, but we just don't know.
I love how we've like normalized the background. Like Barry starts going off on like Roman like background, and me and you were just sitting there. Yeah. Sure. Whereas before, like when it first started, we're like, what? Hang on, start again. Do we know, so if it's this guy, do we know what it would have cost him to do something like this? Like there's obviously no follow-up in the Bible about like how his life ended or anything, but knowing what you know, if somebody of his stature did something like this, like what's the cost of doing that? Because it makes me wonder, like what should the cost be for us to submit ourselves to Christ instead of the empire or the empires that we've created?
Right. I don't know. I wish I knew. I would love to know what happens.
Was he fired?
Next.
Was he killed? Was he?
I doubt he was killed.
I think when it comes to cost, that's next week. Like next week when we're looking at
How do you know? You haven't written your sermon yet.
Calling of Matthew. We don't know as it pertains to the Roman Centurion.
Yeah.
Like, did it cost him anything?
Yeah.
Your question earlier was intriguing to me. Would he have even told his peers that he went and did this?
Right.
Or was the miracle so great that he had to tell everybody that Jesus of Nazareth just healed my servant? My servant was so sick at death's door, and then just with one word, he healed him from a distance. He didn't even touch him.
Right.
Like,
you
could imagine that he could have gone one of two ways: either kept it to himself, or that's the story he told in every gathering for the rest of time.
Yeah.
Like a miracle happened.
Right.
Yeah. I could imagine everybody in his garrison being like, "Oh, there he is, that Judean loving, officer of ours. Like, wish we could get rid of this guy." I don't know. Like, there's so many ways to speculate. We just have so few details to go on.
You said if our churches begin looking like the Cantina, it means God's promises are coming true. Most churches don't look like that in America, so I'm wondering, do you think we have failed to reflect like the essence of that? We've failed to reflect this radically inclusive table, so to speak, because most churches don't look like the Cantina.
No. It depends on how far out you want to zoom. Like if you look at the overall church, you can see that we have believers from every culture, every language group. Like
the Big C Church.
The Big C Church has become this incredibly diverse, amazing, with diverse giftings and backgrounds and perspectives and even theologies. Like it is the Cantina scene. Yep. I mean, it's like, and I use that as an example just because like other cultures can be unsettling or weird or confusing. Like, and so that's kind of what you feel when you go into that Cantina scene in the first Star Wars movie, and there's just like weird looking monsters and people, but they're all just hanging out anyway. So big picture, yes. Big picture, yes. But when you zoom all the way in, I think you're right. Most churches don't look like that. They are not filled with diversity of perspectives and cultures and backgrounds. And if you just traditionally throughout history, most of the time, the little C church has really struggled to open its doors to difference. Even in the early church, I mean, you look at the letters of Paul, he's constantly helping churches like in Corinth to navigate like differences of dietary practices, and here's what to do when the rich and the poor are together, and like stop eating all the food before all the poor people get there from their day jobs. Like you gotta share. It's things like that. It's diversity of economics and culture, and here's what to do with slaves and free people worshiping together, like that kind of stuff. That's all throughout the Bible, and it's evident in early Christian writings as well. So clearly this has been an issue since the very beginning, and it started with Jew Gentile. Like, what do we do with this?
Yeah,
because Gentiles, I mean, just keep in mind, like for a Jewish person to convert. And convert's not even the right word. For a Jewish person to become a Jesus follower, they stayed Jewish and believed that Jesus was their Messiah.
right.
For a Gentile to become a Jesus follower, they walked away from what the Jewish people would have considered pagan worship of a pantheon of gods, sacrificing animals in unfamiliar festivals, and they would have been participating in all kinds of really stuff that the Jewish community would have thought of as really dark and evil and weird. And then all of a sudden they're coming into the church, and who knows what kind of baggage they're bringing with them and their backgrounds, their perspectives, but now they're wanting to worship Jesus. And if I was a Jewish believer and I'm used to Sabbath on Saturdays and I'm used to eating kosher, and all of a sudden these Gentiles are flooding in and they're hungry to know Jesus, like I'd be like, how about we go and we kind of do our own little thing over here, and you guys, I mean, it would be so tempting to just divide, but that's not what the church is called to do. And it's what Paul felt his mission was to help bridge that gap. Like that's literally how he conceives of his calling, is to help bridge the gap between Jew and Gentile. So anyway, all that to say, this has always been an issue.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we should feel necessarily like terrible that we haven't gotten it right. No one has, but it's still the call, I think, that's on the church. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went on for a while.
I guess the conversation about the table made me wonder, like, who I have quietly uninvited to my
Uninvited?
table. Uninvited.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to think that everybody's invited, but I don't think that's true. Like, I've definitely uninvited people who have like hurt me.
Yeah.
But I probably put up some kind of explanation, like I'm setting boundaries or trying to be wise in how close I get to these people or something like that. But they're not invited, so. It's probably a result of fear. So fear is a reason why we probably uninvite people from our table. Fear of getting hurt again, fear of being vulnerable or judged. In fact, I wrote down in my notes, do I believe Jesus has authority over the things I fear? Like my health, my kids, my politics.
You fear your kids?
Yeah, I fear my kids, my kids' health, politics, kids' futures. I pray about these things, but I feel like something has dulled my confidence in the power of Jesus's world, like over these things. Like you talked to us about like praying with like complete confidence and authority. And I feel like I do that, but still people are uninvited from my table. Like and so I guess I'm wondering how, one of the questions is like how to determine whether I am discerning between like healthy boundaries against people that cause pain and are not great to be around just for like safety purposes or whatever. And then differentiating between that and like spiritually disguising my fear as like, that's actually avoidance. You know?
And then there's another, you mentioned the word invitation, and I think that's good to pay attention to too, because there is the sense of like, well, if they're here, I'll welcome them.
Yeah.
But also there's a sense of going out and inviting.
Yeah.
And there are people that I suppose if they came in the door, I'd welcome to my table, but I'm not going to go out of my way to make sure that they're invited. That's the other layer of this too, where welcome is kind of a broad term that can mean all kinds of things.
But if I lived like the centurion is like, that's the least likely dude to have a transformed life by Jesus, and yet he was welcome to the table. So like, who in my life are the least likely people to be transformed by Jesus, and do I actually allow them or invite them to it? And I don't know. The answer is for me, I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
This is, I think, a much bigger conversation than we have time for on this podcast, because he wasn't inviting the Pharisees to the table necessarily. He was condemning the actions of the Pharisees. I think if the Pharisees were to repent, they'd be invited to the table, but it wasn't, and we might touch on this next week. It wasn't Matthew, continue to tax collect and also come to the table. He had to leave everything behind, And so I don't know. Like I said, I think this is a much broader conversation. It's not just a matter of, hey, everyone, while you're still doing what you're doing, come to the table. I think the invitation to repentance is universal and applies to everyone. Hey, everyone, in whatever you're doing, repent and turn. And that goes for me, and that goes for you, and that goes for the worst person you can imagine. We all have the same invitation. But who will respond to that invitation the way the centurion did, or the way that Matthew did?
Yeah, because he called him Lord twice.
Right.
So like,
which for you and I joke about having the little theologian in the back of your mind, or whatever, the little
That's
Greek,
not a
the little
joke.
Greek
He lives
scholar,
there.
the little Greek scholar who's always criticizing you. I know that the word Lord, kurios, is just a term of respect. It can be just a term of respect.
Oh, great.
So just him saying kurios could just mean like sir, right? But however, he says kurios, he says it twice, and he then follows it immediately with, I am not worthy to have you under my roof.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not worthy to have you in my home. To think then that he's just calling him sir, I think is ridiculous. I think he means the full expression of Lord. I think he's actually calling him master. So sorry, there, I've quieted the inner
incredibly
theologian.
humble of him, right?
Yeah.
And Jesus recognized that humility. Did the disciples recognize that humility?
Yeah.
Once you see that the other is humbly responding to the call of Jesus, are you still shunning them, or are you welcoming them to your table?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we should talk about it another time, but like, he didn't ask the centurion to like
Repent.
No, he didn't.
Or stop centurioning.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Could you be a centurion and also like a God-fearing man, like you said, a man of great faith, all these things? Even the compassion he had for his servant, like all of these things point to the kind of man that he was.
Yeah. I wonder, like, if this was a permanent transformation on his part, and he did become a Jesus follower of some kind, how quickly it would have come into conflict with some of his other obligations as a centurion. The Roman military, I mentioned the vow that they made before the gods to obey the commands of Caesar and all that. They also would routinely participate in festivals and make sacrifices on behalf of, and sometimes even to, the emperor. They would be required to participate in sacrifices to like the god Mars, the war god, like things like that. So I wonder to what degree, if he did choose to follow Jesus long term, to what degree did that begin to really grate against him? Like, I can't do both things.
Right,
I have one Lord and one Master. I wonder what would have happened. Again, I wish we could have seen, but
Never know.
never know. Till you're doing a podcast with him in New Creation.
Nah, man, I'll be tilling the land.
Yeah, tilling the land.
If you don't till now, you ain't gonna till then. Let me tell you.
Oh man! All right, where do we go next? What are we
I'll
gonna
let
do?
Marin take that one.
Well, we're going to Matthew 9. I believe this is where we first see the Pharisees in action. I don't think we've
In the series or in the book?
in the book.
You might be right.
I don't think we've seen them in action up to this point. So the Pharisees are hitting the scene. They're judging everybody. It's going to be a good time. I'll be talking about the calling of Matthew, which, so I do this. I read a bunch of stuff about it. I try to internalize it. It very much helps me to go on a walk with my husband and make him listen to everything
just
I've
verbal
learned.
process.
And I was telling him, I was processing out loud with him where I think I might go with the message. and I got choked up.
Oh,
that's a good
So
sign.
That's where
That's a
we're
really
going.
good sign. Oh, great.
we'll see if Jed remembers it
the
the next day.
No, I can't. I can't
Sprinkle
speak to
in
the
some
people
pop
like
culture.
Barry.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll be here next week, right? Everybody's here?
Yeah, as far as I
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
be here.
We'll be back next week then. 2 weeks, week 2, we'll get your, actually next week we'll get your recap of your kids camp experience.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you if I
Yeah.
made it. If it
Yeah,
was,
if you
if
made
my group was still angels by the end, we'll find out.
Okay. Marin, will you please send us out?
Sure thing. Act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. I know. I
See
said
you on
act
the other
instead
side
of
of-
do. I know what's wrong with me. I froze.